Hi, welcome to our lecture 2. In this lecture, we'll be talking about corporate governance. Our learning outcomes for this class will be discuss the objectives, relevance and importance of the corporate governance, and we're going to describe good corporate governance requirements and also directors' responsibilities. We will also evaluate corporate governance deficiencies and provide recommendations, and we will analyze the structure and the role of audit committee and discuss their benefits and limitations. What's the corporate governance, and why do we need corporate governance? The corporate governance is a system by which companies are directed and controlled. And why do we need corporate governance? Because without the corporate governance, the companies cannot be controlled or directed. So the corporate governance is important because it ensures that all stakeholders with a relevant interest in a company's business are fully taken into account. So we are taking care of all interests of stakeholders by allowing the corporate governance to control and direct the companies. Because we know that all the stakeholders or the shareholders have their interests in the company. Imagine that the companies are not directed or controlled, then they will do, or the CEO of the company will do whatever they can in order to benefit from this position, from the position of himself, being a manager of the company. So that's why we need to try to protect the shareholders' investment by allowing the corporate governance to control and direct the companies. As we know, the companies are directed by the CEO of the company, and they have control over the company. So the good corporate governance is required to protect all stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, local community, and the loan companies, and also the government organizations as well. It is important that the aim of the corporate governance is to try to prevent companies' directors from using their power in such a way that may adversely affect the stakeholder groups. Because it might happen that because of information asymmetry, that the directors that they have information, whereas the shareholders or the stakeholders, they don't have information. This information asymmetry will be a deciding factor where the directors will use their power in a way that may adversely affect the stakeholder groups. For example, if we're going to give example, then the directors may pay themselves large salaries and bonuses while they're claiming there's no money to pay dividends to shareholders. Again, another example is they might be taking a lot of money from the company as a bonuses while sacking people from the business. What are the advantages of having a good corporate governance? It ensures greater transparency. Because of the corporate governance, the CEOs of the companies, they now declare on the annual reports. They have statements, and also they will try to put as much information as they can on annual reports. Also, it ensures the CEOs of the companies will have greater accountability, and also the efficiency of the operations are improved, and also they are better able to respond to the risks. And the last one is they are less likely to be mismanaged due to the corporate governance. The mission of Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, is to promote policies that will improve the economic and social well-being of people around the world. So the OECD provides a forum in which the government can work together and share experiences and seek solutions to common problems. And one of them is OECD's Principles of Corporate Governance, where the Principles of Corporate Governance sets out the rights of shareholders and the importance of disclosure and transparency and responsibilities of the board of directors. And what are these principles? So the OECD Principles of Corporate Governance are to promote transparency, as we mentioned early on, and the fair market and efficient allocation of resources. Also, it protects shareholders' rights to ensure all shareholders are treated fairly. To provide incentives relating to investments and to allow stock market to function in a way that supports corporate governance. Another benefit of corporate governance principles of that is that it to recognize the rights of stakeholders and to ensure active cooperation between corporations and shareholders or stakeholders in creating wealth, jobs, and sustainability of enterprise. It also allows timely and accurately disclosure of material matters. The last one is to ensure companies are effectively guided and monitored. When applying the OECD principles, countries may choose to make some elements of corporate governance mandatory but others voluntary. So details of the corporate governance codes differs between the countries. So in the UK, we use corporate governance code as an example. It sets out standards of good practice in the following 5 areas, and these areas are effectiveness, accountability, remuneration, relations with stakeholders, and these each areas we will study them one by one in the following slides. The first one is leadership. Every company should be headed by an effective board, which is responsible for long-term success of the company. There should be a clear division of responsibilities at the head of the company between the running of the board and also executive responsibility for running of the company's business. So no one individual should have unfettered powers of decision, such as chairman taking over running the company as well as being a board member. So chairman is responsible for leadership of the board and ensuring its effectiveness in all aspects of its role. As a part of their role, members of a unitary board, non-executive directors should constructively challenge and have developed proposals on strategy. The second one is effectiveness. The board and its committees should have the appropriate balance of skills, experience, independence, and knowledge of a company to enable them to perform their respective duties and responsibilities effectively. There should be a formal and transparent procedure for the appointment of new directors to the board. All directors should be able to allocate sufficient time to the company. And also all directors should receive induction on training on board, and they should regularly update and refresh their skills and knowledge. The board should receive timely and good quality information to enable it to perform its duties. The board should also undertake a formal annual evaluation of its own performance and its own commitments. So all directors should be submitted for re-election at regular intervals, subject to continued satisfactory performance. The accountability is the third one. The board should present a balanced and understandable assessment of the company's position and prospects. For that, The board is responsible for determining the nature and extent of its principal risks and is willing to take in achieving its strategic objectives. The board should maintain sound risk management and internal control system, and the board should establish formal and transparent arrangements for considering how it should apply the corporate reporting, risk management, and internal control principles for maintaining an appropriate relationship with the company's auditors. The fourth one is remuneration. Remuneration area is where the executive director's remuneration should be designed to promote long-term success of a company. It should be sufficient but not excessive. There should be a formal and transparent procedure for developing policy on executive remuneration, for fixing the remuneration packages for individual directors. No director should be involving in decision in deciding in his own remuneration or his own remuneration, because if there's no remuneration committee, then obviously the CEOs or the directors of the company will might choose to give himself or herself as much as possible. So that's why we need a remuneration committee. The fifth one is relations with shareholders. The board must ensure that satisfactory dialogue with the shareholders always takes place in an open dialogue and maybe annual general meetings. The board should use the annual general meetings to communicate with investors and to encourage their participation. The board, we mentioned that should have comprise a balance of executive directors and non-executive directors. So executive directors run the company on a daily basis, whereas the non-executive directors monitor the executive directors and contribute to the overall strategy and direction of the organization. They also help and give advice to the board members, executive directors. They are usually employed on a part-time basis and do not take part in routine executive management of the company. So their role is as a part-time, they come and attend the meetings and give their advice, and also have they contribute to the overall strategy and direction of the organization. So they participate at board meetings and the provision of experience, and also they contact and assist the board and they give their advice. So the membership of subcommittees are as independent, knowledgeable parties. At least we're going to come back to later on that at least one of them should understand how to run the company and also accounting systems. And corporate governance in action, we're going to discuss each one of these committees and having a board composition, and we have mentioned that the board should have executive and non-executive committees, board members, and also we're going to come back to the committees and we study them one by one. So the committees are Audit Committee, Remuneration Committee, Nomination Committee, and Risk Committee, and we will talk about internal audit control systems. In terms of the audit committees, why do we need audit committee? The audit committee is a subcommittee of the board of directors, usually containing a number of non-executive directors. For example, in the UK, corporate governance code states that an audit committee should consist of at least 3 independent non-executive directors. Roles and responsibilities of audit committee members should be set out in written terms of reference. So what's their job as a daily basis? So they are subcommittee to the board, and they usually contain at least 3 people, and also they report to the board members. And the committee members should be independent of operational management. So the appointments to the audit committee should be made by the board of directors and recommendation of on the recommendation of the nomination committee. So the appointments should be for 3 years, up to 3 years, and it can be extendable by no more than 2 additional 3-year periods. And what are the benefits of audit committee? It has many benefits. Of them is to improve the quality of financial reporting by reviewing the financial statements on behalf of the board members, and also it creates a climate of discipline and control which will reduce the opportunity for fraud, and also it enables non-executive directors to contribute an independent judgment and play a positive role. And it also helps the finance director by providing forum in which they can raise issues of concern and which they can use to get things done which might otherwise be difficult. It also strengthens the position of external auditor by providing a channel of communication and a forum for issues of concern. So if the external auditors come in, then they will have report with each other and they communicate with the internal audit committees. And they also provide a framework within which the external auditors can assert their independence in the event of dispute with the management. And it also strengthens the position of the internal audit function by providing a greater degree of independence from the management. One of the things, the benefits of them is it increases the public confidence in the credibility and objectivity of financial statements. One of the principles of the corporate governance code is that the board should establish a formal and transparent arrangements for considering how they should apply the corporate reporting and the risk management and internal control principles and for maintaining an appropriate relationship with the company's auditors. And what are the problems associated with audit committee? Obviously, the opponents of the audit committee argue that the executive directors may not understand the purpose of an audit committee and may perceive that it distracts them from their authority. And also there might be a difficulty of selecting sufficient non-executive directors with the necessary competence in auditing matters for the committee and be really effective. Also, the establishment of the formalized reporting procedure may dissuade the auditors from raising matters of judgment and limit them to reporting only matters of the fact. And there might be also some costs involved, because if you are appointing non-executive directors to the audit committee, then obviously there's a cost we need to think about, because the cost is increased. Non-executive directors are normally remunerated and their fees can be quite expensive. And the second one, we mentioned that remuneration committee, the role is set the remuneration packages for the executive directors to ensure that they are not paid excessive amount but paid fairly for the role that they do. So the remuneration committee's job is to set remuneration packages for executive directors, so that CEOs of the companies, they cannot take a lot of money as bonuses. So it will have non-executive directors on the board. Advantages of having remuneration committee is that decisions are based on agreement on several persons, reducing the risk of bribes from directors to receive higher packages, and also that no director is involved in setting his own salary or the bonus packages, and also the performance related elements will be included to avoid the risk that the directors are rewarded for poor performance. The next one is a nomination committee. What's a nomination committee? Nomination committee will nominate people to appoint them to the board of directors or non-executive directors. So what's the advantages? Advantages of having nomination committee is they reduce the risk of recruiting wrong person, because they are like HR who are recruiting and they nominate. Reducing risk of improperly affecting the board decisions. Especially executives may appoint people to the board they know they will vote in favor of the same decisions as them, therefore they can influence the board decisions which may not in the best interest of the company. Imagine that the director is the CEO of the company, then without a nomination committee this director, CEO of the company, can bring his own brother or own his relatives to the board, where they don't challenge the decisions of these relatives. Next one is the risk committee. Companies need mechanism in place to identify and assess those risks. And in doing this, companies can risk in terms of their relative importance by scoring them with regards to their likelihood and potential impact. Once identified and assessed, the company must decide on appropriate ways to manage those risks by, for example, transferring the risk to another party by taking insurance, or reducing the risk by implementing effective controls. This is entirely the job of the risk committee. So they are responsible for assessing the risk of the company and deciding the appropriate risks and to the management, and they also take the risk to that products may be obsolete, and the risk of losing key staff, or risk of failure of the IT systems. So these are the examples for the risk committee. Internal control. Why do we need internal control, or why does a company need internal control? So directors of the company are ultimately responsible for the internal control. Once they set up a system of internal control, the directors are responsible for reviewing it regularly to ensure that it still meets its objectives. Some corporate governance codes in the UK recommend that directors should report on their review of risk management and internal controls in the annual reports. The many companies will use the internal audit function to review the internal control and make recommendations to improve them. Again, there are requirements in some corporate governance codes to consider the need for internal audit function on annually. So why do we need the internal control? As we mentioned, that it helps to safeguard the company's assets, it helps to prevent and detect the fraud, and it also safeguards the shareholders' investment. And we're going to talk about internal control in detail in chapter 9 and 10. Let's do one example, and in this example we have Foxconn is a Taiwanese Fortune 500 company. It's a massive company in Taiwan, and also they have bases in China. And the board of directors of Foxconn is made up of 7 directors, and 2 of whom are independent. The chairman of the board of directors is the same as the CEO of the person, and there is no audit committee at Foxconn at present. What do you think of the corporate governance in Foxconn? Does it comply with the broad principles that we have discussed in this class? Obviously, we have mentioned that we cannot put the same person as a CEO of the company and also that he is a chairman of the board of directors. So these 2 positions need to be separate, and it needs to be given to somebody else. As the CEO, as a CEO of the company, Foxconn, he can take the management, and he needs to give the chairman of the board of directors to the other person. As again we mentioned, there's no audit committee, which means if there's no audit committee, then obviously internal control systems are not properly in place. So it doesn't comply with the principles that we have discussed in the corporate governance. So they need to appoint an audit committee in order to have internal control system. Obviously, the CEO of the company will have this internal control system in place because he's going to be in charge of it. But then if they have an audit committee, then they will take this responsibility from the CEO of the company. What we're going to do is start our chapter 4, which is a professional ethics and quality control procedures. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the fundamental principles of professional ethics, and we're going to talk about accepting audit appointments and agreeing the terms of the engagement. So we're going to talk about the engagement letters. Our learning objectives will be: we're going to define and apply fundamental principles of professional ethics, of integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality and professional behavior. We're going to define and apply a conceptual framework, including the threats to the fundamental principles of self-interest, self-review, advocacy, familiarity, and intimidation. We're going to come back and discuss all of those terms. We discuss how to safeguard against the threats, and we're going to describe the auditor's responsibility with regards to the auditor's independence, conflict of interest, and confidentiality issues. So this topic is going to be about ethics. So what is ethics? Ethics can be described as a moral principles that govern the person's, the group's behavior. It's a set of morals, a set of principles, the rules of conduct, or the values. So somebody can say do, and somebody say do not do, and decisions from different alternatives regarding the moral principles. And the mark of any profession, such as accounting profession, is that it accepts it has a responsibility to wider public, not just their own clients. Auditors must comply with ethics code and apply a safeguard to reduce the ethical threats. What is professional ethics? The professional code of ethics is related to the standards of behavior expected from professional people, such as accountants or the members of accountancy firms. The current guidelines on ethics for the ACCA members is that ACCA members must comply with the fundamental principles set out by ACCA Code of Ethics, based on the International Ethics Standard Board for accountants. The Code of Ethics for professional accountants, they obey those rules. These codes of ethics provide a conceptual framework. They are the core of this framework for ethics. What happens if an auditor does not comply with the code of ethics? I mean, this code of ethics are professional for professional accountants and the members of the professional accounting body. And what if you don't follow those rules, principles? If auditor does not comply with the code of ethics, in such cases the professional bodies such as ACCA have right to discipline members who fail to comply with the code of ethics through a process of disciplinary, such as they might ask you, or they might fine you, and if you repeat it again, they might suspend your membership for 6 months or 1 year. And then if you do it again, if you do not comply with the code of ethics, then they might withdraw your membership. So you lose your membership certificate. Again, there's a need for professional ethics. Why do we need professional ethics? Because accountants have responsibility to act in public interest and the wider interest groups. The purpose of assurance engagements is to increase the confidence of the intended users. Therefore, then the users need to trust the auditor, and also, in order to be trusted, auditor needs to be independent of his own way from the client. Independence means having freedom from situations and relations that may affect, that may impair the objectivity of the of the auditor. Auditors need to behave and also be seen to behave in ethical and professional manners. This requires taking active steps to comply with the code of ethics in every professional situations. Again, if you don't follow the code of ethics, obviously if you break the principles, then obviously there's going to be a fine. If you do it again, there might be suspension of your membership for let's say 6 months or 1 year, and if you do it again, then they will withdraw your membership. The professional ethics and the ACCA code of rules that we have. An ethics code have professional fundamental principles to be able to be reputable for auditor, and we have some threats for this ethics, and we're gonna apply some safeguarding in order to eliminate, or to not eliminate, in order to reduce the threats in acceptable level. If you cannot eliminate, or if you cannot reduce the threats to an acceptable level, obviously it's best to get out or not accept those kind of engagements. We're gonna see them one by one. So what are the code of ethics and conduct? They are professional competence and due care, integrity, professional behavior, confidentiality, and objectivity. So we're going to study all of them one by one when we come back in our second part of our lecture. So let's take a break now and come back and do the second part.